Inclusive education in the classroom. How do I know if a student I teach has a disability? There are many types of disabilities, some more apparent than others. The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act identifies 14 categories of disability: intellectual disabilities, learning disabilities, emotional disturbance, hearing impairment, visual impairment, orthopedic impairment, other health impairment, autism, traumatic brain injury, speech or language impairments. How do I know if a student I teach has disability? Students may need to be evaluated to diagnose a disability. The process of diagnosing disability that may qualify a student for special education services goes something like this. Problem identification. Teacher expresses concerns about the student's progress. Teacher makes a referral to their pre-referral intervention team, PIT, and notifies parents. Problem analysis. The PIT gathers information about the student from his or her school history, previous assessments and evaluations, observations, and interviews with the teacher, family, and student. Plan development. The PIT will suggest several interventions the teacher might try to address the student's biggest difficulties. Interventions should be positive and should result in the smallest possible changes to classroom setting and curriculum initially. Plan implementation. The teacher typically implements chosen interventions for a grading period 6 to 9 weeks. The teacher carefully monitors the student's progress and how he or she responds to the interventions. Plan evaluation. The teacher and the team communicate about the effectiveness of the interventions and whether they are being implemented properly during the grading period. The PIT meet at the end of the period to more formally evaluate whether intervention goals have been accomplished. If not, then problem identification. The PIT may decide that the student should be more formally evaluated to determine eligibility for special education services. The teacher fills out a formal written referral for a special education evaluation. And this marks the beginning of the special education process. Problem analysis. The Individualized Education Program, IEP team, is created including the child's parents, at least one special education and regular education teacher, and the other school person. Based on the IEP team's recommendations, the child is formally evaluated by trained professionals in ways such as intellectual ability, health, vision, hearing, academic achievement, social and emotional needs, level of communication, or motor skills. Plan development. If a student is determined eligible for special education services, existing data is studied and new data collected to determine the student's strengths, needs, and possible special education interventions. The student's strength needs measurable annual goals, and the special education service is provided to assist the student in meeting these goals are described in writing in an individual's education plan, IEP. Plan implementation. The accommodations in the IEP are implemented by the special education provider and the EISL teacher, English Second Language teacher. Plan evaluation. The student will receive ongoing monitoring of his or her progress. The IEP is evaluated at least once a year to determine whether learning goals are being met. At least once in 3 years, the student may be re-evaluated to see whether he or she is still qualified for special education services. Which brings us back to the beginning. How can I expect my school to support students with disabilities? Districts are required to uphold the rights of students with disabilities and provide them with certain special education services. My school's special education providers can assist me in determining how to best support my students with disabilities, and at times may even co-teach with me. How can I expect my school to support students with disabilities? There are actually a variety of co-teaching models to choose from: team teaching, alternative teaching, parallel teaching, and station teaching. How can I support students with disabilities in my classroom? Good teaching is good teaching. Using appropriate research-based instructional methods that are good for my regular education students will also be beneficial for students with disabilities. There are certain changes I can make to my best practices to provide added support for students with disabilities. Changes that do not significantly alter lesson content, level instruction, or evaluation criteria are called accommodations. Examples of accommodations: reading aloud written instructions on a homework assignment to students who are not literate in the L2 or have a reading disability, giving students extra time to complete a test or assignment. Changes in seating to accommodate students with visual or hearing impairments. Students learning to read and write for the first time or those disabilities affecting their fine motor skills are given thicker pencils or markers to write with first. Offering text with larger print and fewer items per page for students with visual impairments and those who have limited background experience with text. Changes to lesson content, supplemental materials, level of difficulty in assignment and assessments are called modifications. Examples of modifications: reducing the number of items a student is required to complete on a test or homework assignment. giving students with reading disabilities or limited auto literacy skills a modified version of the text that uses simpler, easier to read language. Creating differentiated worksheet tests and quizzes appropriate to students at different levels of English language ability. Accepting keyword responses instead of complete sentences and approximations in place of correct grammar or pronunciation from students with speech-language impairments or limited oral auto language skills. Reducing the amount of content taught, slowing down, and using more repetition for students with learning disabilities. How can I support students with disabilities in my classroom? Many of the ways to improve instructions for students with disabilities will actually improve instructions for all students. Now let's talk about inclusion. What is inclusion? Inclusion is when a special needs child is placed in a regular classroom. Types of inclusion: integration, mainstreaming, full inclusion, and inclusion. Why people support inclusion? Inclusion improves learning for both classified and non-classified students. Children learn to accept individual differences, children develop new friendships, parent participation improves, it's a matter of civil rights, and the real world isn't divided by regular and special. Why people are against it? Because there will be a loss of support, fear of ridicule, inappropriate for most students with hearing impairments, the mandates for greater academic accountability and achievement are unable to be met, and of course cost saving. From 1992, 43% did not graduate. Dropout rate from 15 to 21%. Less than half of all students with disabilities are employed after having been out of school 1 to 2 years. The future. The support for inclusion to providing special education services is growing. However, full inclusion may be too extreme. There is a lot of concern about the attitudes and capacity of teachers and school organizations to provide appropriate educational services in regular classrooms across Armenia to those who are not typical mainstream classroom students. Solutions. Tutoring services online can be provided, for example, learning RX, increasing inclusion in elective classes, creating a unity club in schools, implementing a program, developing inclusive service learning projects. And here are the sources. Thanks for attention. My dear colleagues, let's make the world better.